So, I discussed in a video previously my thoughts on whether or not Jen knew about Stefan going down to Northport. One of the main things for me believing that she probably did know was the fact that they were sharing a hotel room. And even though we're supposed to believe that Jen takes her meds and then she's knocked out cold, we've heard directly from her comments such as that she'll have that YouTube stuff going on her phone through the night to help her sleep, and then when it stops she wakes up and resets it. That to me says someone who is woken up by changes of the noise around them. There's been several things that she's said that have actually pointed to her not being someone who just completely knocks out, but rather someone who is a bit of a light sleeper. She even talks about how the reason she didn't want Maddie to sleep in her bed that night was because Maddie squirms and squiggles and kicks and all that sort of stuff. Well, if you're a heavy sleeper, I would imagine you wouldn't notice it. She said she didn't want to be disturbed by Maddie's alarm going off. Once again, if you're a heavy sleeper and it's not your alarm, you may well sleep through it, I'm not sure. Depends on the individual. But also, she was woken up quite easily by Stearns going into her room to put the lead on the dog. She was woken up by Stearns going down to use the bathroom at some time during the night. So to me, this story of her not being aware of him getting up in the middle of the room and leaving the hotel room to head down to Northport didn't quite ring true. So, as you know, I received a stack of documents, videos, audio recordings via the whole FOIA request system a week or so back. And two of the documents that I received were the data for the doors in the hotel rooms, for Chris's hotel room and Jen and Stefan's hotel room. And when I first looked at it, it was a little bit confusing. Each of the documents is something like, I think one of them's about 18 pages long, and for each entry there are two different times given. Plus, the entries are in reverse order, so the most recent entry is listed first, and then it goes down to the last entry in the document is the oldest entry. So, took a bit of getting my head around it all. So I had glanced at it and thought, there's some really interesting things here. But it wasn't until I started doing comparisons with the timelines that something really significant stood out to me. So in this video, I'm going to have another look at the timeline around when they were in the hotel room and around the time when Stefan went down to Northport. And I'm also going to listen to some audio from Chris Stearns and from Jen talking about that particular trip to Northport. And then I'm going to go through the relevant sections of these documents, and then I'll pull it all together to explain precisely what it is we're looking at and why this is a concern to me. So let's just jump in with the videos first.
No, go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, okay. So, what time did you get here last night?
3 a.m.
3 a.m. When you got here, where did you meet your son and Jennifer?
We apparently pulled up at the same time at the hotel.
Perfect. Okay. When you guys got there, what did you guys end up doing?
We checked into the rooms. They had 239, I had 203. Opposite ends of the building. I brought my stuff up, went over, said goodnight, and then hit the sack.
So, for those of you who like to take notes along the way, I'll just mention that I have done slides for the end of this video, which you can screenshot if you like, if that's easier. But what do we know here? Chris is saying that supposedly they all arrived at the hotel at the same time. He's got his times mixed up in this particular interview, and he says that he arrived around 3 o'clock, when in actual fact, in a later interview, he does actually refer to his phone, and he says that he got a call from them around 1:50, I think it was, at which point he had just arrived at the hotel. So essentially he's got it a little bit wrong here, and he arrived much earlier. But he then tells us that he had room 203 and they had room 239, which were at opposite ends of the hotel. And what he's saying is that he brought his stuff up to his hotel room, and then he went across to their room to say goodnight to them, and then headed back to his room and went to bed. And in actual fact, we will be able to see in the document, according to the data for his room, that does appear to be what occurred.
I got up at 6:30, 3 hours sleep, and went to the office because I figured he would be sleeping in, crashed and burned, and didn't speak to Jenn until 10:45-ish, and she called and asked if Stefan was with me. And I said, no. Why? Well, he's not here. Oh, we'll go down to the lobby and see if he's down there. How long has he been gone? 25 minutes. Okay. I said, go check the lobby. And then I started to think about it, called her back, and I said, do you have the keys? No, I don't have the keys. So
now, I've actually done several videos talking about my thoughts on Chris Stearns and whether or not he was completely innocent in terms of guilty knowledge, or perhaps heading to Kissimmee for a particular reason. So I'm not going to go into all that now. I do find it very interesting that he's supposedly gone up to support Stefan and Jenn and heads off to the office at 7:30 in the morning. But the significant thing here is that he's claiming that Jenn rang him at around 10:45 and says that Stefan's been missing for 25 minutes. What is inferred here is that Jenn got up at around 20 past 10 and discovered that Stefan wasn't there. We can see in the timeline how that doesn't fit, and I'll come back to that as we go through the documents. I think Chris does give a time of 9:45 in another interview, so it's possible that he's just got his times a little bit confused, especially because when he's saying that she rang him at 10:45 and then he rang her back a bit later to say, have you got your keys, that doesn't fit with him arriving back at the hotel. So I'm thinking that either he's got himself muddled, or this is a made-up story and he's forgotten the details that he's meant to be saying. One or other. And that will become clear as we get further through this video.
The only person she was with was Stefan.
Why would he go to Northport?
I don't know. I don't know what's in Northport other than his parents. Did you know he was going to Northport?
I thought when I woke up and he wasn't in the hotel, I thought. I thought he had gone to the Target Plaza right next door to the hotel we were staying at, because he likes to go shopping when he's stressed. But that's not what happened according to you guys. He actually went all the way to Northport and came back.
Now, I have discussed this particular clip in a previous video, and the fact that basically she offered up the why would he go to Northport in a totally random place in the conversation, when you would have expected her focus to be on the fact that they've basically just told her that he was essaying her daughter. And she has basically completely redirected and spoken about Northport. And because she did so, they asked her if she knew that he went to Northport, and her answer is almost inaudible. She says no, but she says it so quietly you can barely hear it. We know from Jenn, from listening to her many, many interviews, that when you get this drop in volume like that, it's because either she's lying or she's realised that it's something that she doesn't really want to say out loud. It is the brain's way of making an adjustment to prevent you from saying things that you shouldn't say. She doesn't listen to her brain, she just makes the adjustment and whispers these things. So this was a red flag to me, even before I looked at these documents.
Do you know anything about how she died?
No.
Did Stefan tell you anything about how she died?
No.
Did Stefan tell you about his plans to go back down to Northport in your car that Wednesday morning?
Now that one is super significant because that is actually the derivative use interview. Meaning that if Jenn has lied in that interview, game on, basically. So if she has lied to them at any point in that interview, and they can prove that she's lied, she's going to be in huge trouble. Now, again, we got the really, really, really quiet answers from Jenn. But not only were they really quiet, with each question they got even more quiet. So first question was, do you know how she died? And the no was really quiet. Then, did Stefan tell you anything about how she died? The no again was quiet, but it was getting even more quiet. And then, when they said, did Stefan tell you about his plans to go down to Northport in your car that Wednesday morning? You have to really listen hard to hear her say no. You could think, well, it's a derivative use interview. She's not supposed to lie, so maybe this is the truth. But we know her pattern. We know the fading truths, the almost quiet, almost silent answers. These are the ones when we need to pay the most attention to Jenn. And I've said this before. So why do I believe that she's lying here, other than just the fact that her voice got so quiet when she said no? And I will point out too, when they said, do you know that he went down in your car? If she knew about his plans to go to Northport, and she allowed him to take her car to go to Northport, that right there is accessory. That is 15 years in jail, maximum, with a $10,000 penalty. So I hope that if what I'm looking at here in this video is just an inkling of proof that she knew, that they follow up on this and that they go at her for this. But going back to why I am convinced, not just from listening to this audio, but I'm now convinced from looking at these documents. So let's start with looking at these documents relating to the key codes, the keys for the doors for the hotel rooms, and go from there. Now, the thing that made this document really confusing was that the dates and times were not correct. So they actually had to be adjusted to get the correct times. So that's what it's saying here. Key use and entry records. Dates and times for used occur are adjusted to reflect terminal's date and time at the time of interrogation or before clock programming. D or S after date indicates times could not be accurately adjusted. A lowercase a after DST, STD, D or S indicates an adjustment was made. So the times we need to look at in this document are the times that have the lowercase a after them, because they give us the accurate dates and times, whereas the accompanying dates and times are not accurate. Possible users of keys as printed when names are available, which in the case of guests, you don't get that. So the rest of this is not quite that relevant. You will see with this that one of the things that does appear is with the first entry for both these rooms, it says new user. So that indicates this is the first time that they entered the room. So let's move on and have a look at the entry records. Now, I'm more than willing to make these documents available to anyone who is interested in having them. At the moment, the easiest way of doing that would be probably if you were to email me and I could email you back a copy. I will pin my email address to the comments section. Hopefully the comments won't be turned off, because that would just be a pain in the proverbial. I think my email address is actually in the description section for my channel anyway. I have been contemplating, and let me know your thoughts on this, I've been contemplating creating a free Patreon account. Basically, it would be one where you sign up, it's not going to cost you anything to sign up and be a member of my Patreon. And then I can drop all the documents, all the audio, all the videos in there. I may put a minimal charge on them, like $1 or $2 or something, simply to get reimbursed for my time. I'm not interested in making money out of a Patreon account. It's more about just providing a way of making these available for people. But having recognised how much time it's taken me just to download all of these FOIA documents, and I'm not even finished yet. Definitely, I think if I do put these into a Patreon account, I would probably put like, $1 or something on each document, just like I said, to be reimbursed for my time. So let me know if you're interested in me doing that, providing comments are turned on. I guess you can always do what some people have been doing and going and commenting on another video, because it seems that once I upload a new video, the comments in the older videos get left alone. Go figure, I don't know what's going on there, but eventually, hopefully it'll get figured out. Right, so let's jump in. This is Chris Stearns' room lock number 203, room number 203. It is confusing because we have to work up the page. Looking at the bottom entry, which is the first one, on the second last line it says new key. So we know this is the first time that Chris used his key. If we look at the second line on each of these entries, that's the line to look at, because you can see that it says STDA. This is the correct time, this is the adjusted time. you can see the unadjusted time is way off. Also, I'll just note that all these entries occurred on the 28th of February, because obviously they didn't get to the hotel room till very early in the morning, and then Jenn and Stefan were taken to Orange County for their interviews around 3:30, so after that you don't have them returning to the hotel rooms. And of course that's not hugely relevant to what I'm discussing in this video. So first of all, we have the key being used at 2:25 a.m. So this is when Chris first entered the room. The next entry, and they've recorded it as egress or exit, because obviously it isn't going to show, 2:27 a.m. Now, we can acknowledge here that this fits in with what Chris said in his timeline. He said that he took his stuff up to the hotel room and then went over to say goodnight to Jenn and Stefan. So this actually points to the fact that he is actually being truthful in what he said, that the 2:25 is him going to the hotel room, 2:27 is him having dropped his stuff off, heading back out the door again. So let's look at the next page. So we have a second entry here for 2:27 a.m, which means this must have been closing the door. So the first one would have been opening the door, the second one would have been closing the door. It has been recorded twice. If we look at the first entry, it is recorded as 0044, whereas this one is recorded as 0043. So I think it's recording the key opening and then shutting. And then we have him returning to the room at 2:40 a.m. That is our adjusted time, so that's looking at the second entry from the bottom. That fits in with him going across to their room, saying goodnight to them and heading back to his hotel room and going to sleep. We know that in the morning he went to his office at around 7:30, and that actually fits here. It says the key was then used at 7:23 a.m. Egress or exit. I'm not sure why it's not double recorded here, unless the reason for the double recorded with the 2:27 is an issue with the key card, perhaps, I don't know. So we have 7:23, he exits the room and is caught in the hotel lobby on camera, which I'll show you in a little while. And then you have him returning at 2:58 p.m. and leaving again at 2:59, and that's the final entry for that key. So he didn't actually return to the hotel room any time through the day other than when he was checking out, by the looks of it. And that's the only data for that room. So he really did just use that room to sleep in, and that's pretty much it. When we look at Jenn and Stefan's room, there's a lot of entries there. So I'll go through them, and then we'll have a look at what information we do have from other documents and do a comparison. So now we're on to lock 239, which is Stefan and Jenn's room. This is the first entry, and you have a new key, and then there's two different keys here. Key ID number 41, key number 239. So there's two keys allocated by the looks of it. Then we need to go down to the third line here, and it says 2:18 a.m. allowed to open. So you have Stefan and Jenn entering their hotel room at 2:18 that morning. Okay, and again, we need to work up the page with these entries. So the next entry is 2:29 a.m. The door was opened, and we know that fits with Chris going across to their room after dumping his luggage. So I would say 2:29 is Chris entering the room. He stays for about 10 minutes and then leaves again at 2:39, and that fits with the time of him returning to his room. The thing that I find interesting here is that there is this entry, 2 entries for the door being opened and closed at 2:52 a.m. But there is no further entry or exit connected with that. So I'm not sure what that means, but it's definitely interesting. We know that it does not relate to Chris, because at that point in time he's already in his room and his door does not open. So this 2:52 a.m., where you've got 2 events of the key, I'm not sure what's going on, but it was definitely either Stefan or Jenn opening that door and closing it. Now, if anyone has any ideas over what may have been occurring at that point in time, I'd love to hear them. I don't know if maybe they came in with one key and they were just testing the other key. Maybe because someone was planning on heading out and wanted to make sure that they both had keys that worked. Possibly. Don't know. But that's about the only explanation I can think of, because it seems that they didn't go anywhere, unless, of course, they were gone for a significant period of time and did not return till 4:32. But I don't think that is the case because of the timeline, and I'll show you that later. So moving on from that, we have this 2 events at 4:32 and 4:33. Now we know that Stefan was caught on camera leaving the hotel around this time, and I'll come back and we can have a look at those times shortly, looking at when we get to those documents. So 4:32, the door opens, presumably. 4:33, the door closes. Once again, I'm getting these from the second or third line in each instance, where it's got the STDA. These are adjusted times. These are accurate times. And we know that they are accurate times because we can compare them with footage from the hotel lobby as well, which that's what I used to confirm that I was getting this right and that I was interpreting this correctly. Okay, let's move on to the next page. This is where it gets interesting. Again, we have to work up the page. Now, I've actually repeated the last entry that we looked at. So the 4:33 at the bottom is what we just looked at, which is someone closing the door. Why am I saying it gets interesting? Because 5 minutes later, at 4:38 a.m, the door is opened. A minute after that, 4:39, the door is closed. That's really significant. And you'll see why in a minute. Then we have at 9:51 a.m. the door is opened. We know that they recorded on camera Jenn taking the dog out for a walk at that point in time. So the 9:51 a.m. is Jenn taking the dog out to do its business. So 10:03 would have been her returning to her room. Now there's a lot more entries, but I'm only going to look at two more. I think it's two more in relation to what I'm discussing here. But I do want to acknowledge that there are so many entries for this particular lock. So the two entries that interest me are these two at the bottom. You have 10:51. You have a key event occurring. Now I'm thinking that's the door opening based on what we've just looked at. And then at 10:55 you have another key event occurring. Following that, which is probably, actually it is significant, the next event isn't till 11:37 a.m, which would be someone opening the door and closing it again at 11:38. That is definitely significant. I'll come back to that shortly. I'll just skip through and quickly show you the number of times they were in and out of that room, because it's just interesting. So the next entry we have is 11:47. Then you have 12:15, 1 p.m, 1:47, 1:51, 2:45. There is one more, I'll come back to that shortly. I think looking at those times around lunchtime fits in with Jenn saying that Chris came and took them to go have lunch. What I'm curious about is, where was Chris for the rest of the day? Was he with them the entire time? Because we know he wasn't hanging out in his hotel room, and yet he claims that the only time that he only got like 35 minutes with them. And yet, if that's the case, where was he for the entire day? Because he was not in his hotel room. We have had Jenn saying that she went and got lunch with Chris, and I can't help wondering if he was perhaps with them or with Jenn the entire day. Because otherwise, you know, what would he have been doing? Just going shopping? Didn't he say he went up there to support them? So I think, yeah, those lunchtime ones, 12:15 one could have been them out going to get lunch. And then 2:45 is one of the last entries, and I'll explain that in a sec. I'll just flip onto the next page first. So the last two entries you have here are 2:57 and 3:04. So I think what has occurred, if they're saying that Stefan pretty much slept all day, I think the first of those three entries, the 2:47 or whatever it was, I think that one would have been Jenn probably going up to the room to say, the detectives are saying they want to take us now to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. You need to wake up and get organised. And then I would imagine 2:57 and 3:04 is them getting themselves packed up and sorted and heading out of the hotel. So 3:04 was the final entry for that room for them. The next one is basically a new log, and it is a hotel log for the room. So It's really hard to wrap your head around all these times. Don't worry, I'm coming back to this. Like I said, I will pull it all together at the end of the video. I want to have a look now at what has been recorded in terms of surveillance. Okay, so looking at the first entry at the top of this page, it says 0435, so 4:35 in the morning, on camera, Stefan leaves the hotel through the front lobby. So they've basically gathered camera footage which shows him leaving the hotel via the front lobby. Now, because I know that there are people who do have this document now, I'm adding page numbers with these to help you out. So if you wanted to go look at this for yourself, this is page 189 in the 501 page document. Next we have Chris Stearns leaving the hotel through the front lobby at 7:28, and that's also via a photo image. This doesn't entirely tie in with what I'm talking about here, but it's still important because it helps us to figure out timing. Okay, so on the next page we have Chris Stearns walks into the hotel lobby, via the lobby, at 10:50 in the morning. So all the other entries before that are just tracking Stefan basically on his trip down to Northport and his return. They have not recorded in here when Jen went out to walk the dog, but it is recorded somewhere in one of the documents. So that does fit in with the key time of the 9:50 or whatever. I will just point out though, that doesn't fit with her saying, or Chris saying that she rang him at 10:45 and saying that Stefan had been gone for 25 minutes. Hence the reason I believe that she rang him much earlier. So at the top of the page you have Stefan returning. So 10:55 on camera, Stefan walks into the hotel lobby. And then at the very bottom of the page you have them recording at 3:30. Stefan and Jen were brought into Central OPS. So that would be the time that they arrived there, I believe, because we can see from the hotel rooms that they left before 3 or around 3. I would imagine by the time they checked out and then there was the transporting them there, that would probably fit. Either way, I don't think that's hugely significant to what we're talking about here anyway. So that's the timeline that we have. And we also have these times from the keys. So now we need to have a look and figure out how it all fits together. And this is where it starts to get interesting. I'll share my original theory, and that was that Stefan had gone out twice during that evening, or during that early morning. That the door opening and shutting at 2:52 was him leaving the hotel and perhaps going out by a side entrance because he's not recorded in the hotel lobby, and then returning again at 4:33 or whatever time it was. But that doesn't fit at all. So I suspect that the opening and closing the door at 2:52 has no connection with the later times. So time to pull it all together. Let's have a look. Okay, so starting with Chris's room, we have him, he checks in, brings his luggage up from the car, and then he goes to Jen and Stefan's room. So that is your 2:25, him putting his luggage into his room. 2:27, he leaves his room again, and then 2:40, he returns to his room. I'll show how they compare later with Jen and Stefan's room. Then you have the key time of 7:23, and him leaving the lobby via the lobby at 7:28. So it took him 5 minutes to get from his room to the lobby. Now, we know that his room is at the opposite end of the hotel from Stephanie's room and Jen's room. So it seems that it may have been also further from the lobby, and we'll see that in a moment. So just starting with the first entries here, we have Jenn and Stephan entering their room at 2:18. Then we have Chris entering the room at 2:29 and then leaving the room at 2:39. Just a quick comparison with Chris's timeline. So just comparing the times, you have 2:27 and 2:29 and 2:39 and 2:40. Don't forget, it's not recording it as being exactly at the start of 2:27. So clearly, you know, it could have been 2:27 and 40 seconds or something. So what we can get from this is that it takes somewhere between 1 and 2 minutes to get between the two rooms. And it takes Chris 5 minutes to get from his room down to the lobby. Okay, so it would appear from this that Jenn and Stephan's room is perhaps closer to the lobby, because if we look at these events, you have the 2:52 door event, which I'm not sure what the explanation is for that. 4:32, the door is open. 4:33, the door is closed. At 4:35, Stephan is seen on camera leaving the hotel via the lobby. So it took roughly 2 minutes to get from their room down to the lobby, meaning that definitely their room is closer to the lobby. Here's where it gets interesting. We have Stephan recorded as leaving the hotel at 4:35. He's not recorded re-entering straight away at any point in time, or leaving again several minutes later. But you have at 4:38 a.m, 3 minutes after Stephan has left the hotel, the door is opened for their room, and then at 4:39 the door is closed. This can only mean one of two things: that Stephan left the hotel via the lobby, ran up the stairs, opened the door and shut it again, and didn't go in because obviously there's no time elapsed here. Or Stephan left the hotel and Jenn opened the door at 4:38 and closed it again at 4:39. Now, that time frame there is way too coincidental. Way too coincidental. Maybe for some bizarre reason, Stephan did use a side entrance just to go up and open and shut the door again. Doesn't sound very likely to me. So I'm leaning towards this 4:38, 4:39 opening and closing being Jenn. 5 minutes after Stephan. 3 minutes after he left the lobby. Is it possible that at 4:32, when the door was opened and closed, that Jenn went part way to the lobby with him for some reason, and then returned to the room at 4:38? It doesn't say here that she was seen on camera leaving the lobby. That doesn't mean that they don't have her on camera in the lobby, because we know that they have left out so much data on Jenn from all these documents. So it is quite possible that they could actually have her on camera in the lobby with Stephen at 4:35 in the morning. But that's not been recorded because they're still working on building a case against Jenn. Like I said in one of my videos earlier this week when I was talking about if they could be still working on a case with Jenn, not only are there so many things, so much information that we haven't been given with Jenn, but there was a filing made early on in the case which was a request to seal particular documents. We don't know what was sealed, obviously, but could it be that documents, etc., have been sealed that are towards building a case against Jenn? Possible. Quite possible. Now, I said quite some time back that I found it really interesting that Chris and Stefan enter the lobby 5 minutes apart from each other. So we have Jenn going out at 9:51. So is it possible that when Chris is saying she rang him at 10:45 that she actually rang him at 9:45? Because I think that Chris does actually give a 9:45 time in another interview. So you have her taking the dog out at 9:51 for roughly 10 minutes, bringing the dog back in. But here's what's interesting. Like I said, I find it sus that Chris and Stefan have returned within 5 minutes of each other. But what's even more interesting is that you have Jenn opening the door of her room at 10:51 and then again at 10:55. These tie in with the return of Chris and Stefan. Did she have a view from her room of the car park and she saw one or both of them out in the car park? Did she perhaps greet Chris in the lobby and then return to her room before Stefan returning so that it wouldn't look sus as if she was waiting for him? Because she returns to the room at precisely the same time that Stefan enters the lobby. It's interesting, it could just mean nothing, but I find it really curious. You have all these interesting connections here, time-wise. But for me, the most significant one is the fact that somebody opened the door of their room after Stefan had seen leaving the lobby to go to Northport. Does it mean that he dashed back up to the room for something and came in by a separate entrance? Because to me that does not make sense. This guy is too dumb to think about surveillance. We know that just from looking at the amount of surveillance that they have of this moron. So I don't think that is what has gone on here. And I also think that at 4:35 in the morning, the only way in and out of that hotel would have been via the lobby. There certainly wouldn't have been any side exits unlocked. So the only way that he could possibly have returned would have been back through the lobby. So to me that says it was definitely not him who opened the door at 4:38 a.m. and then closed it at 4:39. To me, that strongly suggests that Jenn was awake when Stefan went to go to Northport. Maybe him closing the door woke her up, but then why would it take her 5 minutes to then suddenly go, oh, Stefan's not here, I'm going to open the door, look out in the corridor for him? No, that does not make sense to me. This to me says someone needs to be questioning Jenn again. Someone needs to be asking Jenn, why is it that the only people with keys to that hotel room were you and Stefan? Stefan had just left the hotel. We have him on camera. We have this evidence. And yet the key is recorded as once again opening the door 3 minutes after Stefan had left, closing it 4 minutes after Stefan had left. Does this prove Jenn is guilty? As in guilty of having guilty knowledge? Well, I don't think that this one thing on its own would convince a jury, that's for sure. But I do hope that one of the things that's not been released is surveillance footage of Jenn at this hotel. Because there's nothing here in the document showing surveillance footage of Jenn. There's no discussion of surveillance footage of Jenn. And there's nothing mentioned in the documents about this additional time with the hotel room door being open and closed just after Stefan has left. Did they all have a conversation about Stefan going to Northport? And once again, Jenn is using the alibi of, I was asleep, I know nothing. Or maybe there is a perfectly rational explanation that completely absolves Jenn and makes her look completely innocent. Right now, I'm struggling to think of one, but if you have suggestions, please do let me know. I'm really, really curious to hear your thoughts on what is shown in these documents. Because to me, it's a massive, massive, massive red flag. And I really hope that these detectives have actually been digging much deeper when it comes to Jenn. So that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully the comments will be left on by YouTube and you can leave comments because I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this. But thanks for listening. Also, if you're new, please subscribe to my channel. I'm getting so close to 4,000 subscribers now. I'd love to see that happen. And of course, hit the like button so we can get these videos out into the algorithm, getting them seen by more people. And please do leave a comment below because I'm so keen to hear your thoughts on what I've looked at here in this video. Now, in relation to the comments being turned off, I apologise. I know it's frustrating when you have something that you are burning to say and the comments are turned off. Just be aware that when YouTube does turn my comments off, I do go back and turn them back on. So if you are wanting to comment on the video, the option is to return and leave your comment later when the comments are turned back on, or I will still see your comment if you choose to comment in a different one of my videos and just mention that you're commenting on this particular video, so that I don't get myself confused and think, hang on, what is 433 got to do with this video? Because I do get a bit confused sometimes when I see comments that I have to stop and think about what is being said. But anyway, thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.